Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Brady Grove bringing you episode 202 of the Tap That MMA podcast. And this podcast is brought to you by Parlay Play Fantasy Sports. Use my referral code RotoBrady, get that sweet deposit bonus. They got paid contests coming to states and probably territories, probably countries and planets near you. They're giving out boosts, bonuses. They're slashing lines all day long, hopping those player prop DFS contests. It's a real fun platform over there. And what is up, everybody? Like I said, episode 202 of the Tap That MMA podcast, and we've got UFC Fight Night Mexico this weekend.
Oh God. Take care of your underwears. I'm gonna you, man.
Definitely not the best week last week, but I think plenty of us were caught by surprise. Not the two underdogs that I wanted to get it done in Josiah Harrell and Nora Cronole, but my God, Sean Strickland, for what he accomplished in the main event, I mean, that certainly shocked me. People in hindsight can, or in retrospect, can act like that didn't surprise them. But with the momentum that Fluffy Hernandez had going into that fight, with the way Sean Strickland looked in the DDP rematch, that one certainly caught me off guard. And now middleweight, back to a weird spot where Sean Strickland, right there to be able to contend for a title again. If the guy, if it ends up after the next fight or whatever, if it's not Dricus Du Plessis, and it probably won't be. So we've got a pretty light week of combat sports, really. We got LFA 227. We got Navarrete versus Nunes. Next week, Ryzen 52, Octagon 85, UFC 326, Zuffa Boxing 4. So for my picks on all that stuff and more, follow me on Twitter at RotoBrady. Follow the podcast at Tap That MMA Podcast on YouTube and Spotify. Now available on Apple Podcasts and Amazon Music. Follow me on Instagram, RotoBrady MMA. I've had some great interlude episodes that I've been able to put out recently with Mackenzie Mack, Judo Stiller, with Emily Crown, with Kobe, the Sandman Sanders. Go check out those episodes. I've got several more in the works. New sponsors and partners in the works for the Tap That MMA podcast. Should have news on that really like in the coming weeks. But yeah, check out the interlude episodes that I'm going to be putting out at the end of this week. Yeah, come out to the Rotoballer MMA Discord on Saturday. Let's talk about what you're doing DFS wise and betting wise for UFC Mexico City. Check out my MMA DFS values picks article that comes out on Fridays through Rotoballer. Keep an eye out once March hits for my UFL gambling content. Can't wait for the spring football season to kick off. And so I don't go an hour and 45 minutes like my return to the ring last week. Let's get into it. We got 13 fights for UFC Fight Night Mexico City. Card starts at 5 p.m. on Eastern Time on Paramount Plus, and we start off with a middleweight matchup between Wes Schultz and Damian Pinas. Now, Wes Schultz is the plus 215 underdog. Penis the minus 255 favorite. Let's talk about Wes Schultz first. 8-2 as a professional. 29 years old. 7 of his career 8 wins have come inside the distance. He's only been finished once out of his 2 losses. One of those was by Mansour Abdul Malik on the Contender Series, already August 2024. That was already that long ago. He came back on the Contender Series. That was his most recent fight, was against Mario Mingash. Beat him with a Sulov stretch, round 1, October of 2025. This guy has plenty of LFA experience. He's 4-1 in LFA, and those opponents had, decent records. His 2 last losses, his 2 only losses as a pro are to Dylan Budka and Mansour Abdul Malik. Say what you want about Dylan Budka, but for that to be someone's first and one of 2 professional losses, not that bad. Now, Baba Yaga, Damian Pinas, 8-1 as a pro, hailing from Aruba, 23 years old. Noteworthy, he will have a 2.5-inch reach advantage despite being the same height as Wes Schultz. Seven career wins by knockout, one by submission. He has never gone the distance. His only loss is by disqualification, March of 2024, with an illegal kick in Shudo, Brazil. Now, here's the thing. I had many questions about this guy's professional pedigree coming into the UFC. Before the Contender Series, his opponents had a combined record of 11-8, both in Shudo, Brazil. There's just not a lot reputable there for the most part. On the Contender Series, he ends up winning with a round one knockout over Vitor Costa, 25-year-old middleweight who had, more reputable experience through LFA and through Jungle Fight. Um, so naturally, like, what does Wes Schultz want to do in this fight? You really want to put Damian in some, tougher grappling positions, ideally. This guy is a knockout artist. That's how he's, won 7 of 8 professional fights. And he's never been the distance. So if you're Wes Schultz, you want to tire him out. You want to take him into deep water. I think that is certainly a possibility. That was kind of ideally the game plan for Wes Schultz against Mansour Abdul Malik, and he was able to throw some kind of tough stuff at Mansour. Ends up getting finished in round 2. Is Damian Penis cut from the same cloth as Mansour Abdul Malik? There's two, I think, clear cut ways to go here. Like Wes Schultz money line plus 215, I think is certainly a possibility. And I actually think you get a better number than I would expect because Wes Schultz by knockout is plus 875. Wes Schultz by decision is plus 900. Wes Schultz by submission plus 325. Even if you did just like a method of victory double chance, submission and decision, you can get a pretty good number for Wes Schultz. But moneyline plus 215, that's not that bad. If you're going Penis, I think you go Damian Penis by knockout minus 140. I don't think you have to, like with Mansour, he's not such a heavy favorite where you have to get cute, thread the needle, and pick around. I think Penis by knockout TKO minus 140 is fine. If I was going to pick around, just like Mansour, I would pick round 2. I don't think Penis is as dangerous as Mansour Abdul Malik. And Wes Schultz, has possibly learned from experience. So maybe like, even Penis after, the halfway point, I could see that too. Penis by knockout in round 2 is plus 400. Round 3 is plus 1,000. Next up, we've got a featherweight matchup between Eric Silva and Francis Marshall. Francis Marshall is the minus 725 favorite.
I want to tell me what you see. Let's go ahead and see by the fight what you saw in the ring.
Eric Silva, the plus 525 underdog. So let's start off with the guy we're going to be a little bit more familiar with here. Start off with Francis Marshall, 8-3 as a professional. 26 years old. Not old. 4 wins by submission, 1 by knockout, 3 by decision. 2 of his career 3 losses are by decision. And, here's the thing. I think you would have been reasonable to have questions about Francis Marshall's professional pedigree coming into the UFC, but that was back in 2022. Beat Connor Matthews on the Contender Series, finished Marcelo Rojo in the second round, December of 2022. Here's the thing about Francis Marshall. His only win since December of 2022 is a split decision over Dennis Bajukka. He got TKO'd by Isaac Dolgarian in round 1, August of 2023, but his other 2 losses, April of 2023 and March of 2025, were by split decision to William Gomi and Myron Santos. 1 judge away from beating either one of those guys, and you might think a lot differently about Francis Marshall if he has a win like that on his resume, especially the Myron Santos one. By that same token, he was 1 judge away from losing to Dennis Bajukka. But this is a guy that's found himself in some really close fights, and he's come out on the wrong side on 2 of those, which would have been really meaningful wins. Important to note, he fought March of 2025, August of 2024, August of 2023. It's not like he's been the most active dude in the world. He did have a fight canceled August of 2025 against Austin Bashi. Eric Silva, this is where it gets interesting. 9-3 as a pro, 38 years old. 3 wins by knockout, 4 by submission, 2 by decision. All of his career losses are inside the distance. And he had a good career before coming to the UFC in Lux Fight League. Won 4 fights in a row there against opponents with like good records. You know, he was the Lux Fight League featherweight champion back in February 2022. The last 2 opponents he beat before he was on the Contender Series had combined records of 32, 11, and 1. Not bad at all. Beats Anvar Boynazarov on the Contender Series via round 1 TKO. By the way, when he was on the Contender Series, that's less than 4 years ago. Like I guess he was like 34 years old. So strange. Then he gets submitted in his real UFC debut at UFC 282 by Downtown TJ Brown. Then he gets injured against Muhammad Naimov in the first round, February of 2024. So here's what I think. Okay. This is such a trap spot. One that probably won't come through. But this is a dangerous spot for Francis Marshall. This is a guy that has fought once since December of 2022, hasn't won since he was on the Contender Series, August of 2022. This is a guy pushing 40 years old. And we've got Francis Marshall as a minus 700 favorite. If I'm going Francis Marshall, it has to be inside the distance, and I don't even know how well that's going to work out for you. Francis Marshall inside the distance is minus 325. Now, Eric Silva has been submitted more times than he's been knocked out, and Francis Marshall submitted more people than he's knocked out. Yet, of all things, I'm right on that, right? Francis Marshall, 4 wins by submission. Yeah, even more often than by. So Francis Marshall by submission is plus 115. By decision is plus 350. You could maybe even think about pairing both of those together, and I don't think it would be too bad of a number. For a minus 700 favorite, I don't think it'd be a bad number at all. Where you have a guy this favored and the most, the chalk method of victory play is plus 115. At the same time, Eric Silva, plus 525. I mean, there's not going to be a lot of people maybe that support you in that unless they're giant Francis Marshall haters. But this just seems like almost too ready-made for Francis Marshall. 38 years old, the activity level that he's had, the hiatuses, it's just very strange. And it's going to be strange for Francis Marshall. So we've seen fights like this before. I think like maybe like a Zachary Reese fight comes to mind. But when guys are fighting people that are like pushing 40, haven't fought in like, well over a year, 2 years, and it's like, why is this fight? It always seems like it ends up tougher than you expect it to be. So Francis Marshall, by sub, by decision, you can put those together, sure. That makes sense. Eric Silva, money line plus 525. Eric Silva by decision plus 900. Going with Francis Marshall's recent pedigree or recent resume. Eric Silva by split decision plus 2400. Those are some long shots I'd maybe take a look at. No one's given Eric Silva a chance, and that makes sense. But these are circumstances that we just don't see play out as expected over a good sample size. Next up, we have a women's supposed to be flyweight matchup. I believe it's going to be happening at a 130-pound catchweight fight, but that is between Ernesta Karakaite and Regina Terran. So Terran these are all out of order on Bet Online, but let's see here. Okay. Ernesta, minus 185. The favorite, Regina, plus 160, the underdog. Let's talk about Ernesta Karakate first. Nicknamed Heavy Handed out of Lithuania, she is a 6-1-1 professional, 27 years old, 5'9 with a 71-inch reach. 2 wins by knockout in her career, 4 by decision. The only loss in her career is by decision. And that was to Dion Barbosa in her real UFC debut after she beat Carly Judas by split decision September of 2023. Her only other win in the UFC, split decision over Nicole Cagliari. That was January of 2025, so over a year ago. She has pro kickboxing experience, pro boxing experience. The only professional knockouts happened in a row in her first and second professional fight within a few months of each other in 2019. Otherwise, these have all been going the distance. Even her 2 amateur fights, kickboxing and MMA, both went the distance. Now, specifically for Ernesta in her 3 UFC fights that counts the Contender Series, she landed 184 strikes with a takedown against Carly Judas. She got taken down twice against Dion Barbosa. She did land her own takedown. She outstruck Dion 53-39. It was 29-28 on all 3 judges' scorecards. They actually had close to even control time, despite Dion Barbosa having more takedowns. I kind of recall disagreeing with that outcome. But then, against Cagliari, outstrikes her 95-67. Cagliari gets 3 takedowns out of 14 attempts. Ernesta didn't even attempt one. Ends up with Nicole ended up with 3.5 minutes of control time, but ultimately Ernesta landed 77 strikes to the head out of her 126 total strikes. That's always going to make a pretty big difference. And she just I don't know, she limits control time really well, and she's good at, even without takedowns, getting some of her own. Now, Regina, hailing from Mexico, nicknamed Kill Bill, 7-0 as a pro, 21 years old, 5'7" with a 66-inch reach. She's 2 inches shorter. She has a 5-inch reach disadvantage. And, how old did I say Ernesta is? She's like 26, 27. 21 is young and fighting someone with 3 fights that went the distance in the UFC, someone who was able to eke out, 2 really close decisions, maybe should have even gotten the one against Dion Barbosa. It was certainly a close fight. Regina, now this is going to be in Mexico, all right? So is that a lot of pressure for a young fighter? Is it a good boost? I think that it's anybody's guess for a lot of these guys, a lot of these fighters on this card. She's got more inside the distance victories, but it was in, she was the Budo Sento flyweight bantamweight champion, actually, September 2024. So, she's 3-0 in Budo Sento, 3-0 in Combate Global, 2 wins by submission, 4 knockouts, only 1 decision victory in her career. It was her second pro fight. Her last 2, let's say 3. Combined record of her last 4 opponents dating back to July 2024 and 17, 20, 2011. Not bad. There was just one 7-5 opponent there, but that was Caitlin Neal, who's a recognizable name, and that was in Combate Global. I mean, really, and her only loss as an amateur was by knockout. She has at least gone into championship rounds too. That's something I can appreciate. But so has Ernesta when she won the Hexagon flyweight title back in January 2023, going the distance, winning that by split decision. It's just that, I would love to go Ernesta by knockout, and I think that you can probably get a decent value on that. Ernesta by knockout is plus 500. I think you get a really good value on that. Just because, she's won mostly inside the distance up to this point as a pro doesn't mean that's how it's going to go forever for someone who's 27 years old with 8 professional fights, and more, boxing and kickboxing. I do think for that reason, like Ernesta by decision minus 125, it's probably the more likely outcome. But I think by knockout is too good of a value at plus 500 to pass up. Um, Honestly, I'm not feeling Regina as a money line play. I think that like if you were to go with Regina, um, if you were to go with Regina, I'd go. I mean, by decision is plus 300. Um, I think Ernesta is. It's not like Regina is, an absolute wizard on the ground or anything like that. Ernesta's never been submitted. She's never been knocked out. She has a solid striking pedigree. I think that the only way that Regina does win this fight is, kind of a hodgepodge of mixed martial arts and winning a split decision. Now, like Regina by split decision, that's plus 1,000. Ernesta by split decision, that's plus 800. That's one to look at. But on this one, I would say Ernesta by knockout plus 500. That's your best value. Ernesta by decision minus 125. Certainly can't knock it, but give me the knockout plus 500. Hit it. Next up, we've got a featherweight matchup between Douglas Silva de Andrade and Javier Reyes. Javier Reyes, the minus 215 favorite. Douglas Silva de Andrade, the plus 185 underdog. Let's start off with the favorite, Javier Reyes, 22-5 as a pro, 32 years old, 2-2 in LFA. This is a long professional record from this dude. If you've ever seen him fight in LFA, he's held several regional belts. You always like to see that, and especially when those fights go the distance. But plenty of losses. Throughout his career, but a lot of activity, and he's only had 2 losses since February of 2019 when he's fought 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. 2 losses in his last 14 fights. They both came in LFA. One was to Lyrian Douglas by round 2 knockout. The other was to Chris McCate by decision in the main event of LFA 208. But he's been everywhere. Fought in Combate Global, UCC, LFC, FFC, Budo Cinto. Yeah, he's been to a bunch of different promotions. 18 of his career wins are inside the distance. Only 4 decision victories. 2 of his 5 professional losses are by decision, 2 by knockout, 1 by submission. He is on a 2-fight winning streak. Both fights happened in 2025. He lost to Makate in 2025. Beat Caleb Moctezuma by first round knockout to start off 2025. This guy fought 1, 2, 3, 4 times last year. But that 2-fight winning streak, a second round rear naked choke over Lance Lawrence at LFA 210, and then a first round knockout over Justice Torres. Justice Torres, who at 28 years old was coming in on a really good run in Fury FC. And, that was an emphatic win for Javier Reyes. Now, Douglas Silva de Andrade, born in 1985. All right. So, Douglas Silva de Andrade is 40 years old. He's going to be, I believe, shorter. They might be the same height. They're both 5'7", but he will be at about a 4.5 reach disadvantage. For Douglas Silva de Andrade, 20 of his career 29 wins are by knockout, 7 by decision, only 2 submissions, only 2 losses inside the distance, 1 by knockout, 1 by submission. 4 of his career 6 losses are inside the distance. 29-6 as a professional, 7-6 in the UFC. So let's take this back to a reasonable point. He's been in the UFC since 2014. In the UFC, his losses have been to Zybura Tukagov by unanimous decision, Rob Font by guillotine, Pyotr Yan by round 2 corner stoppage, Lerone Murphy by decision, Syed Nurmagomedov by decision, and Miles Johns by decision. Technically, he's won 3 out of his last 5. That dates back to October of 2021. He knocked out Gaetano Perello. He submitted Sergey Morozov, and he beat Cody Stamann by unanimous decision. So it's not like Javier Reyes is this guy coming in like destroying everybody undefeated. He's had his ups and downs as a pro, as is Douglas Silva de Andrade. But look at the competition difference in who they have faced and beaten. My God, Douglas Silva de Andrade has beaten Chito Vera. He's beaten Renan Barao. I mean, wild for a guy that's been around so long. Yet, what was it? He's been in the UFC since 2014, has 13 total fights. Here's what I think. All right. It has proven really difficult for somebody to beat Douglas Silva de Andrade inside the distance. The last time it happened was Pyotr Yan, like 7.25 years ago. Not to say that Javier Reyes can't do that, because Douglas Silva de Andrade, this is his first fight as a 40-year-old. Javier Reyes, much closer to his physical peak. And again, 18 of his career 22 wins are inside the distance. If I'm betting on Javier Reyes, I'm saying inside the distance, and it's hard to pick which one of those, like knockout or submission. Javier Reyes inside the distance is plus 125. Not bad at all. I think that's where I would end up going with this. It's not like Miles Johns or Said Nurmagomedov are big finishers in the first place. But Douglas Silva de Andrade, money line plus 185. Yeah, I think that's worth a look too. Some people can still fight when they're 40 years old. And again, this guy's won 3 out of his last 5 fights, and every loss he has ever taken as a professional has been, someone beyond really who Javier Reyes has ever fought. Even Miles Johns, there's no shame in any of the losses that Douglas Silva de Andrade has ever taken. So I wish it was a little heavier. I wish it was like plus 185. Or I wish it was like plus 200. I think like Douglas Silva de Andrade by decision plus 425. That's where you're getting that a little bit more than by knockout. You could go by knockout and by decision, method of victory, double chance. I just wouldn't go by submission. That has proven to be a very rare thing for Douglas Silva de Andrade, and I think Reyes would be too crafty on a bad night even to allow that to happen. But Douglas Silva de Andrade, on a night where I'm not looking at many underdogs, he is one that I think you have to consider. Like, is this one of these freakish dudes that can, stun a younger guy at the age of 40? I think it's certainly possible. Next up, we've got... Wait, there's no way I've only talked about 4 fights so far. 2, 3. Nope. That is true. Wow. All right. Well, Christian Quinones versus Chris Moutinho at bantamweight. Moutinho, the plus 500 underdog. Quinones, the minus 700 favorite. Well, let's talk about the underdog, Chris Moutinho first. Things have not gone well for Chris Moutinho in the UFC. He's 14-7 as a pro, 33 years old. 5 of his career 7 losses are by knockout. All of them are inside the distance. So when he came into the UFC on short notice, it'd be reasonable to be skeptical of his professional pedigree going into the UFC. He's, fighting out of CES, and I believe what state's he out of? Yeah, fighting out of Massachusetts. He's out of the Northeast, the New England area, and their regional circuit can be misleading at best.
I want to tell me what you see. Let's go ahead and see by the fight what you saw in the ring.
He's lost plenty of fights to people with and been submitted by people with close to 500 records. knocked out by Tony Gravely in round 4 in 2019 for the CES bantamweight title. Knocked out by 17-12 Johnny Campbell in 2019. Wins 2 more fights in between. In CES and 1 against 6-5 Andrew Salas at CFFC 96, almost 5 years ago. Fights Sean O'Malley on short notice and gets absolutely destroyed.
But I'm not impressed by your performance, and I look forward to.
Sean O'Malley lands a UFC record amount of strikes in that fight up to round 3. That was on at UFC 264. Gets knocked out by Guido Canetti March of 2022. Loses a grappling match. Loses a boxing match. Then he went on a little win streak to get back to the UFC. It was 5 straight finishes in Combat Zone, CES, and Cage Titans. So all kind of the same area. He got a vengeance on Johnny Campbell, November of 2024. Comes back to the UFC, fights Malcolm Wellmaker, gets knocked out in the first round. He's been knocked out in every single one of his UFC fights. 2 in the first round. Hilariously, the only guy that did knock him out in the first round was Sean O'Malley. I have no doubt that Chris Matinho is super tough. But can he beat anybody outside of guys that I don't really think are that strong a competition in the New England area? We have we've yet to really see that at any point, even in his winning streak getting back to the UFC. Now, Christian Quinones, not the same story. Dude is 29 years old, 10 wins by knockout, 3 by submission, 5 by decision. He's never lost a decision. All 5 of his career losses are inside the distance. And, he was in Combate, Brave CF before the UFC. Some reputable promotions for sure. UWC, he was actually the bantamweight champion there before he came on the Contender Series, where he beat Long Zhao by unanimous decision. Then he knocks out Khalid Taha September of 2022. Then gets submitted by Kyung Ho Gong and gets knocked out by Ronnie Barcelos in a row, June of 2023 and February of 2024. He was supposed to fight Adrian Yanez last November. That got canceled. Quinones had to withdraw, and now he's fighting Chris Matinho. I mean, what would we say? How many submission losses for Matinho? Look, I mean, Matinho actually hasn't been submitted since 2017. I think both of his submission losses came in a row. One of his amateur losses, one of 2, is by split decision or by submission, triangle choke to Manny Bermudez. I just outside of Chris Matinho being tough, I don't have any reason to opt for him here. Christian Quinones might be on a 2-fight losing streak. He might not have fought in say what will now be over 2 years. But the opponents that he fought are better. He's won in the UFC. He's won in the Contender Series. He's been a champion of promotions that I hold in higher regard than CES. Brave CF as well. Everything about Quinones, the problema. Wouldn't it be problemo? Whatever. You'd know better than me. Everything about him speaks to being much more legit and dangerous than Chris Matinho. Chris Matinho.
Oh God, take care of your underwears. I'm gonna you, man.
I would say Christian Quinones minus 700. It seems appropriate. I don't know how. I don't know how this is. If this is a bad finish, it's the last time I want to see Chris Matinho in the UFC, and that's not a knock to him. It's just that there's no need for him to keep taking damage in fights that I don't think he can win from the offset. He could prove me super wrong on Saturday. So let's see. It'd be amazing if he did. But give me Christian Quinones by knockout, minus 125. Hit it. See, there's not a lot of love that I have for underdogs on this card. And it kind of gets like that more as we move up the card. Next up, we have a women's bantamweight matchup between Eileen Perez and Macy Chiasson. Macy Chiasson is the plus 150 underdog. Eileen Perez, the minus 175 favorite. Let's talk about Macy first, okay? And I was real disappointed in her last fight. She missed weight against Yana Santos. For women's bantamweight, I get that there are some people that are forced to fight at women's bantamweight that would otherwise like to be fighting at 145 pounds. I support the women's featherweight division. I wish they would give, people the outlet to fight at the weight that they should be fighting at. And Macy, having a 72-inch reach, she's 5'11". Macy is, I understand that it's hard to get down to 135 pounds. I still find it disappointing because she's done it, plenty of times. She's now lost 2 in a row, both by unanimous decision. One to Yana Santos. The last time she fought, October of 2025, it was 29-28 on all 3 judges' scorecards. Honestly, I didn't even feel that good about it. I know Macy won a round where I think there was just less activity, but Yana kind of took it to her. Against Ketlin Vieira, another kind of low activity fight. She loses 29-28 on 2 of the 3 judges' scorecards. She got controlled for 10 minutes of that fight without Ketlin Vieira technically landing a single takedown. Macy did have 2 wins in a row, both by finish over Pani Kianzad and Mayra Buena Silva, March and June of 2024. And she's won 3 of her last 6 fights. The other one was a split decision over Norma Dumont. Normally, I like Macy Chiasson. I was disappointed with the last 2 fights for sure. Macy's fought so many of the best people in the world at this weight, never fought for a title, but she's fought, all the best contenders at women's bantamweight. There's just been a line that she hasn't been able to get past, and it's Lena Landsberg, Raquel Pennington, Irene Aldana, Ketlin Vieira, and Yana Santos. In this weight class, you're probably only a couple good wins away from, being in the title picture. That just, as more time goes on for Macy, more time separated from, being on the Ultimate Fighter and beating Pani Kianzad the first time, it just becomes harder and harder to believe. Now, Eileen Perez, she is 6 inches shorter. She will have a 6-inch reach disadvantage. But my Lord, how Eileen Perez has surprised us all after her UFC debut, where she got submitted by Stephanie Egger, September of 2022. So, and also of note, she's about 3 years younger than Macy. You'd think it'd be a little bit more, but Eileen Perez, 12-2 as a pro. She's now won 5 fights in a row, and she's twerked her way to fame in the meantime.
I want to tell me what you see. Let's go ahead and see by the fight what you saw in the ring.
Yeah, she was able to mostly ride a good volume of takedowns to the first 3. She had 10 takedowns against Ashley Evans Smith, controlled that fight for 11 and a half minutes, outstruck her 60-12. 2 takedowns against Lucy Pudilova. It still translated to 8.5 minutes of control time, outstruck her 42-20. Still, she gets really dominant rounds too. Even in the Pudilova fight, where she won 29-28 on 2 judges' scorecards, she had a 29-27. Against Ashley Evans Smith, it was 30-26, 30-25, 30-25. Now, there's some extra weirdness that contributes to scores like that, but still. Then she beats Jocelyn Edwards. Jocelyn Edwards, who we now have seen on a 4-fight winning streak, finishing Tamiris Vidal, Chelsea Chandler, Priscilla Kuchera, and Nora Cornola just this past weekend. So beats her by decision, knocks her down, gets 6 takedowns, controls for 4 minutes, 18 seconds. Actually, less time than Jocelyn ended up controlling with 0 takedowns, but Eileen had the more meaningful control. And against Jocelyn Edwards, ends up beating her on the scorecards 29-28, 29-28, 30-27. Then Daria Zelezniakova, short fight, ends up winning that by submission in round 1. And then is coming off the biggest win of her UFC career by unanimous decision over Carol Rosa, outstriking her 62-53, got 2 takedowns, controlled for 4 minutes, 15 seconds, wins 30-27, 29-28, 29-28. Has Macy Chase never fought Carol Rosa? Wow. How is that possible? Never fought Carol Rosa. Um, well, she fought Irene Aldana, and that's, kind of comparable. Um, yeah, look, like Macy has been like she actually had more control time. She got a couple of takedowns against Yana. That's like why she ended up getting around. She got controlled for 10 minutes against Ketlin Vieira. Eileen Perez seems to just get better and better. Every time I think she's hit kind of a ceiling, she proves that wrong. I Two ways to look at this. I think Macy as an underdog at plus 150. I think it was plus 160 earlier today. But Macy, plus 150 or even like by decision plus 300. I certainly think those are in play. Like this is one fight where, as much as I don't love it, if you're looking for an underdog spot, this is one of the places where I think it can make some sense, where you're not like chasing a really heavy underdog. But Eileen Perez just keeps getting better and better. And Macy's mostly lost by decision. She's been finished by Irina Aldana and Raquel Pennington. Those are, maybe special circumstances. Um, I think what'll most likely happen in this fight, the size disadvantage for Eileen is crazy, but we know where Eileen carries her weight. I could see that being a problem. It's not like Jocelyn Edwards wasn't, significantly bigger too, and that did not stop Eileen Perez. I think that this is a fight where if you back Macy, there's a pretty good chance you could end up super frustrated over the course of 3 rounds. If Eileen controls her, if Macy doesn't do much with the opportunities she has on the feet. So I would say Eileen Perez by decision, or by submission. By decision is minus 125. By submission is plus 800. Pair those together, method of victory, double chance. I think you get a good number out of that. But, I have to look at Macy as an underdog for how much of a veteran of this division she is, how much bigger she's going to be. She's fought better competition in aggregate. But Eileen Perez coming off the biggest win of her UFC career, how much better she, keeps getting. The momentum is a downward trajectory for Macy. I think you have to go Eileen. And I think the two most likely outcomes here are like by decision or by submission. Hit it. How in the hell am I going to build a DFS lineup at the end of this? Next up, we have a middleweight matchup between Ryan Gondra and Jose Daniel Medina. Medina is the plus 525 underdog. Gondra the minus 725 favorite. And, Jose Daniel Medina.
Oh, God. Take care of your underwears. I'm gonna you, man.
Yeah. So, last time out, Jose Medina, Chicho out of Bolivia, 11-6 as a pro, 34 years old, 6 feet tall. 8 wins by knockout, 2 by submission, 1 by decision. 3 of his career 6 losses are by decision. He's been knocked out once. And let's look at the way that the last 4 fights have gone. He wasn't on. So even in like his professional career prior to the UFC, most of his wins against. So this is like October 2020. 0-0, 0-2. He beat an 0-2 opponent to win the AFC Light Heavyweight Championship. 2-1, 2-0. Beats an 11-23 Cesar Benitez, October 2022, to win the Samurai Fight House Light Heavyweight Championship. And then beats Fernando Fio by split decision, Thunder Fight 42, March of 2023, at light heavyweight. Goes on the Contender Series. Loses by decision to Magomed Ghaziasalov. Gets signed to the UFC anyway. Loses to Zach Reese by decision. Gets knocked out by Atiba Gautier, round 1. Didn't get submitted by Dusko Todorovic, September of 2025. The year 2025 was not good for him. That's where he finally lost. He lost two fights inside the distance in the first round in a row. Had to go against a murderer like Atiba Gaultier, who since then, has proven not so invincible necessarily against, a dude like Andre Puliev, who has just proven like super hard to finish. This is going to be Medina's fifth UFC/Contender Series fight. And he is 0-1 in the Contender Series, 0-3 in the UFC.
But I'm not impressed by your performance, and I look forward to
Ryan Gondra, 30 years old, a little bit taller, like an inch. I think the reach is about the same. He's 8-1 as a pro, also nicknamed Problema. 4 wins by knockout, 2 by submission, 2 by decision. His only career loss is by knockout. He's 2-0 in LFA. That professional loss, that was in his second pro fight, April of 2022. He got knocked out by Leonardo Guanino at Savage MMA 2. Has amateur boxing experience, won both of those fights. Love to see that. And, at least opponents with decent records. You don't start to see him in like recognizable promotions until like February 2023 when he went in Spartacus MMA, Federic Cow fight a little bit after that. The 3 fights before he was on the Contender Series, a round 1 submission on Bison Combat, which is now on UFC Fight Pass, their events. Round 2 knockout over Alessandro Gambolino at LFA 171, November of 2023, and then knocks out a 4-0 Vladimir Calvo at LFA 197, November of 2024. Comes on the Contender Series a little less than a year later, August of 2025, puts away Trent Miller by first round knockout. Trent Miller was 30 years old. He was a little bit shorter, had a, decent reach, and was 1-0 in LFA. He had been in Tough Enough, Baroka. That's a guy that had been in solid promotions too. And it was no problem for Ryan Gondra. So really, like, I think the real thing here is, do you want to be riskier with the method of victory? Gondra's last 2 finishes were in round 1. Medina's last 2 losses, I believe, were both in round 1. I think if you were going to go more specific, I think you go like Gondra in round 1. That's plus 155. Gondra by like knockout in round 1. That's plus 260. I mean, that's not doing a whole lot for me. But straight up, of all things, Gondra by knockout is plus 130. Gondra by sub plus 250. Gondra inside the distance is minus 250. I think that minus 250 inside the distance could be a good parlay piece. If I'm going with a specific method of victory, I am perfectly happy to not go with a round, not go any more specific than Gondra by knockout. It can be hard to knock out Jose Daniel Medina, but like, he takes a lot of shots. Gondra has mostly been knocking people out over his pro career, has boxing experience. I think submission is certainly on the table. That's why I don't mind the minus 250 inside the distance. But Gondra by knockout plus 130. Hit it. And again,
Take care of the underwears. I'm gonna you, man.
of course, directed towards Jose Daniel Medina. Next up, we have a bantamweight matchup between Santiago Luna and Angel Pacheco. Santiago Luna is the minus 625 favorite. Pacheco, the plus 450 underdog. Well, let's start off with Angel Pacheco. He's sizable underdog. 0-2 in the UFC. That's counting the Contender Series. Lost decisions to Danny Silva. That was in an awesome Contender Series fight. He got outstruck 204 to 197. Got knocked down once. Lost a decision to Callan Lufron March of 2024. Outstruck 140 to 88. Got taken down 3 times. That's Pacheco. And earlier in his professional career. So he's 7-3 as a pro, 34 years old. Fighting out of St. Cloud, Minnesota, home of Marshall Erickson. All 7 wins inside the distance, all 3 losses by decision. And again, not overly impressed with the dude's. He's got a win over a 1-0 opponent in LFA back in 2020. Beat a 12-8 opponent in CFX, 9-13 in CES. And as a submission, which is his last win, August of 2022 against Vilson Nidreggioni at CFFC 112. Vilson was 5-2 at the time, and now he's coming off these 2 straight losses. I don't think those are 2 bad decision losses. It's been a low level of activity for sure. Hasn't had any fights canceled in that time. Definitely competitive 3-round fights that he put on with Danny Silva and Lufron. But, so I think he can bring it. It'll be 23 months since he last fought. And against Lufron, he was a plus 290 underdog. Against Danny Silva, he was plus 170. Santiago Luna, 7-0 as a pro. Out of Mexico, the border boy, as he is nicknamed. You got to love that. 21 years old. That's maybe where I'd have any reservation at all. All wins inside the distance. 3 knockouts, 4 wins by submission. No fight has ever gone the distance. This is a guy that never lost as an amateur. All but 1 fight was inside the distance there. Wins in UWC against opponents with at least winning records, not too experienced. Beats a 6-1 opponent in LXF. Beats a 4-6 Desmond Monabot at Tough Enough 144. And so, I had a bunch of questions about him going into the fight with Pong Lei at UFC Fight Night back in September 2025. He went in as the minus 155 favorite. I was thinking, what the hell? How is he the minus 155 favorite? Considering, the lack of experience from his opponents. He's coming off a win over a 4-6 opponent and Tough Enough. But he got it done with a round 1 knockout. This is a really interesting matchup for a guy like Pacheco, who's only won inside the distance. He's only lost by decision. Luna has never lost, and a fight has never gone the distance as a professional. Now, like Danny Silva, for instance, while he can land a large volume of strikes, 5 wins by knockout, 5 by decision. So there's kind of an even split there. And submission wasn't really much of a threat. Callan Lufron, 5 wins by knockout, 2 by submission. That guy's gone the distance at least 6 times in his career. I think considering that it's been almost 2 years for Pacheco, and how good Luna looked in his UFC debut, I think that where things could go wrong for Luna as a 21-year-old fighter from Mexico, fighting in Mexico. Technically, he was born in San Diego, but he's fighting out of Tijuana. And is he bigger than Pacheco too at bantamweight? He's got a 74-inch reach. Pacheco, yeah, he'll have a 4-inch reach advantage over Pacheco. I think Luna inside the distance, eventually you take enough shots, you fight dangerous fighters. It is really hard to go the distance every time and not get finished. And Luna looked fantastic in his UFC debut, and he's going to be fired up for this one. That's where things could go wrong for the young fighter, but also it could be an early into the night for Angel Pacheco. Luna inside the distance is minus 215. I don't hate that at all. And what? Luna, 3 of his last 4 wins are by knockout. He mostly submitted lesser experienced fighters, and he's got mostly submissions. what I say, 3-4, mostly submissions, but as a pro, his first 3 wins came by submission. And so now it's been mostly knockouts. I think that makes sense. Let's go Luna by knockout plus 160, hit it. If you're going Pacheco, go Pacheco money line plus 450. I don't know what to tell you. And that is assuming a lot. That's assuming Luna has an adrenaline dump as a 21-year-old fighting in Mexico, tries too hard to get a finish. Pacheco has fought more UFC opponents and has never been finished, so it could be tough to put away. And Luna could gas. I think that is the route to victory you're looking for Angel Pacheco. The prognosis just looks worse for him too as more time goes on. It's maybe different when you're in your early 30s, but now you're 34 looking to get back on track after 2 straight losses, and you haven't fought in almost 2 years. Next up, we've got a flyweight matchup between Emmanuel Rodriguez and Kevin Borjas. Rodriguez is the minus 450 favorite. Borjas the plus 350 underdog. Now that's an underdog I could maybe get behind. All right, so let's actually talk about the underdog Kevin Borjas first. Born in 1997, not old at all. Now he is counting the Contender Series. He is 2-3 in the UFC / DWCS. 10-4 as a pro. Beat Victor Diaz by unanimous decision on the Contender Series, outstriking him 87-43. He did get taken down 5 times. Then he loses by decision to Joshua Van. Gets knocked out by Alessandro Costa. His most recent fight, August of 2025, he got pretty pieced up by Sumata Hari, outstruck 73-16, lost 30-27 on all 3 judges' scorecards. He did have at least 3.5 minutes of control time, but no takedowns. The one victory actually in the UFC came over Ronaldo Rodriguez, who beat Ode Osborne, beat Dennis Bondar, and got outstruck 83-64 by Borjas. Borjas knocked him down. He got 1 takedown on Borjas. Ultimately, these scorecards came out 29-28, 30-27, 30-27 for Borjas over the Lazy Boy. So Kevin Borjas, he's been pretty tough to finish. Alessandro Costa, his last 2 wins in the UFC have been by knockout, both in the second round. He's had to fight some tough fighters too. His 3 losses in the UFC are to Amir Albazi, Steve Erceg, and Alden Correa. Correa, who's coming off a decision win over Elise Guruli this past week. So that is the story for Kevin Borjas. Not old. 1997. For people like me, born in 1997, I don't think that's old yet. We're not 30, we're 28. I think that's still in prospect range. I am still a prospect. Now, Emmanuel Rodriguez, 6-0 as a professional because your professional record does not take the Ultimate Fighter into account. He is 26 years old, fighting out of Mexico. 5 wins by knockout, 1 by submission. He has never gone the distance as a professional in non-exhibition fights. So before the Ultimate Fighter, 2 wins in Budo Sento against opponents with a 5-1 combined record. A win in Combate Global against a 2-2 Emmanuel Burman. A knockout over Tyrell Hill at Fury FC 93. A knockout of Alberto Trujillo at 9-4 Alberto Trujillo at Fury FC 96. So 2-0 in Fury, 2-0 in Budo. Good records between the opponents. His opponents' records in Fury combined 13-6, and he knocked them each out in the first round. Then he goes on the Then he goes on the Ultimate Fighter. Knocks out Arshian Memon in the first round, February 2025. Then loses by split decision to the eventual winner, Joseph Morales, in a fight that a lot of people thought that he should have won based on the damage that he did striking. Morales won that fight with the control and the positions that he obtained in grappling, but that was a very close decision on the Ultimate Fighter that I forget if that's one that ended up going 3 rounds, but that was a very close fight. He very well could have advanced. Then they say, all right, you didn't win the Ultimate Fighter, but let's bring you on the Contender Series. You can fight Roque Conceição. And he knocks him out in the first round. So a very impressive professional run by Emmanuel Rodriguez, who is still quite young. That dude was born in 1999. So, Kevin Borjas overall as a 10-4 professional has been knocked out once, submitted once, 2 losses are by decision. Joshua Van's not really a guy that knocks you out. Joshua Van, even through the beginning of his UFC run, that was a lot of high volume striking, but 3-round fights. And now Sumata Harry's even gone the distance in his last 3 fights. Even though as a professional, most of his wins in China were inside the distance. Kevin Borjas is a tough dude to finish. I think it is certainly within Rodriguez's wheelhouse. So I think Rodriguez by knockout seems to make the most sense as a method of victory play there. And Rodriguez by knockout is plus 115. That's not that bad for a minus 450 favorite, really. By decision is plus 225. I think those are the 2 most likely. I think if you can get a reasonable number for a method of victory, double chance there, I think you could take it because I don't think that this one really ends by submission. I think that he either hits Kevin Borjas really hard a lot of times, and that either finishes Kevin Borjas or it doesn't. I think that Emmanuel being 6-0, he's fought on some big stages. He's fought on, both prospect stages that the UFC offers, and being on the Ultimate Fighter is a different kind of spotlight. So I don't think that he'll get too overworked by fighting in Mexico. I mean, Borjas, will probably be kind of pumped up too. He's from Peru. I'm sure there'll be some people there rooting for him. Or maybe everybody in the crowd will hate him and throw glass at him. That's always a possibility too. So Rodriguez by knockout plus 115. Otherwise, Kevin Borjas so far at plus 350 is one of the bigger underdogs that I think could be a play here. Borjas is just tough to beat, even though he's lost mostly in the UFC. I don't blame him too heavily for a loss against Joshua Van. He lost pretty bad to Sumata Hari, really. But the Ronaldo Rodriguez fight, that ended up being a pretty good win. For a guy that's 6-0 as a pro and Rodriguez, after the Ultimate Fighter, after the Contender Series, now you're fighting on this big Mexico card. There's some interesting circumstances that Rodriguez will have to handle well to be at his best on Saturday. So Rodriguez by knockout, Rodriguez by decision, but Borjas money line plus 350. I do think that is one of the heavier underdogs that is in play for UFC Fight Night Mexico. Next up, we've got a flyweight matchup again between Edgar Chairez and Felipe Bunez. Edgar Chairez is the minus 355 favorite. Bunez the plus 290 underdog. Let's talk about Bunez, the underdog, first. 14-8 as a professional, born in 1989. His one win in the UFC since arriving January of 2024 is by first round armbar over Jose Johnson. I don't hate the losses that much. He got knocked out by Joshua Van in his UFC debut January of 2024. He lost by decision to Rafael Estevam. August of 2025, outstruck 33-26, taken down 5 times, loses 29-28 on all 3 judges' scorecards. And that's not horrible for Estevam, who has not lost in the UFC. And was this the one already? Was this the one that was the missed weight by Estevam? Now I'm going to find out real quick. I need to know. Against Estevam, that ends up being, he weighs in at 125 pounds. I'm not seeing that Estevam missed weight in that one. Did he have a fight canceled? Yeah, against Alan Nascimento. That's the one where Estevam withdrew. They should just create a 130-pound division for Esteban. That would make the most sense, wouldn't it? So, for Bunez, the win doesn't mean a lot to me. He is not young. His record isn't great. The losses just aren't like that horrible, but Esteban tends to like under deliver even on this winning streak that he's hilariously on. Um, so yeah, that's where I land. That's what I think of Felipe Bunez. Now, Edgar Chairez, another guy, like, strange how this guy's time in the UFC has proceeded. 12-6 as a pro, born in 1996. He will have a 2-inch reach advantage. They are the same height. Chairez is from Mexico. I think that will be a good thing for him at like 30 years old. Yeah, he's 30 now. Yeah. I think that could be a good thing for him. He's mature enough to handle it, I would think. And Chairez has been in there in some bigger, he was on UFC 290. Look at the opponents, though, that Chairez has fought and taken the distance. He even lost on the Contender Series to Clayton Carpenter.
But I'm not impressed by your performance, and I look forward to.
But he took Tatsuro Taira the distance, knocked him down, lost 29-27 on all three judges' scorecards, has the no contest with Daniel Lacerda. Rematches him a few months later, ends up getting a first-round submission, and Daniel Lacerda, he hasn't won in 6 UFC fights. The Chairez fight was his last in the UFC. But he gets that submission. Then he takes Joshua Van the distance, gets outstruck 118-79, taken down 3 times, loses 29-28 on all 3 judges' scorecards. So it has his moments against Tatsuro Taira and Joshua Van. Now he's coming off a first-round rear naked choke victory over CJ Vergara, March of 2025. I can't believe he hasn't fought since then. So both of these dudes wins in the UFC. Both of their losses, or, Bunez's losses, kind of, but mostly Chairez's 2 decision losses actually in the UFC. Putting Tatsuro Taira in danger and Joshua Van, being 1 round away from beating him, that's maybe that minimalizes it, but like 29-28, that's a close competitive fight. And guess what? Joshua Van and Tatsuro Taira, the guy's fighting for the flyweight title next. He's won 2 of his last 3 fights. At least his last fight, was in 2025. I think overall, like, how many times has lost inside the distance? 3 times out of his career, 8 losses. He was submitted by Osier Formiga at LFA, lost 3 straight decisions at ACA in 2018 and 19. But 2 of his last 3 losses have been inside the distance. Edgar Chairez, Piero Cicali, I don't know what that means, but it's a pretty cool nickname. All 12 of his professional wins have come inside the distance. And I think he accomplished more probably before coming into the UFC. He was in Fury and UWC. He lost to Clayton Carpenter, but he got back to the UFC with a couple of wins. Combate, he was a champion there. There's just a little bit more here with Edgar Chairez, kind of like in every department. And Chairez, what did I say the actual odds were here? Minus 355 is a lot. So like I would go Chairez inside the distance. That's minus 160. I don't hate that at all. Most of his wins have been by submission. Bunez, 2 of his 3 inside the distance losses have been by submission. If I'm going more specific for Chirez, it's Chirez by submission. That's plus 210. But I don't hate inside the distance minus 160. Otherwise, I don't know. Maybe give a look to Felipe plus 290. These are two fighters with very weird sets of results in the UFC. And, you survive a submission attempt, survive getting knocked down, take it into deep water. Maybe you can eke out a decision. Buna's plus 290 on the money line. Buna's by split decision is plus 1400. So, because of the nature of this fight, I don't like Felipe Bunas really, but I think at those odds, I think you have to consider him as one of the, heavier underdog plays. This is just a card I have not had a lot of fun thinking about how I'm going to bet it. And I'm scratching my head, as you can see from how insane my hair is, at what I'm going to do for DFS lineups. All right, folks, we have 3 fights left on the card. A lightweight matchup between Daniel Zellhuber and Bobby King Green. I'm still going to call him Bobby. Bobby Green, the plus 375 underdog. Daniel Zellhuber, the minus 500 favorite. Now, again, we're in Mexico. I have to think that overall, that's going to be an advantage for fighters from Mexico. It could be a bad thing. You never know. Everybody's brain handles it differently. Let's talk about Bobby Green. All right. Winner of his last fight, 2 of his last 4, and 4 of his last 7. Things were looking pretty bad there for a second because he got slept by Jalen Turner, submitted quickly by Patty Pimblett, and knocked out with a highlight reel wheel kick by Mauricio Hufi, March of 2025. That happened in a 4-fight span, those finishes. And with Bobby Green being, almost 40, he'll be 40 later this year. Considering that he first fought in the UFC in 2013, he first fought in Strikeforce in 2011. His fight with Dan Lozon at Affliction Day of Reckoning was January of 2009. This guy has fought everybody that the UFC lightweight division can throw at you over those years. And now, he beat Tony Ferguson July 2023. That's actually not even that long ago. He submitted him. He knocked out Grant Dawson. Then we started to have some of these troubling results, but beat Jim Miller by decision at UFC 300 in what was a fantastic fight between staples of the UFC. Listen to these scorecards, by the way. He outstruck Jim Miller 186 to 57. He got 1 knockdown, 1 takedown, not even a minute of control time. Scorecards 29-26, Tony Weeks. 30-25, David Letheby. And 29-27, Chris Lee. All over the place. Now, he's coming off of a split decision win over Lance Gibson Jr., UFC Fight Night, Royval vs. Cape. That was the last UFC event of 2025. Obviously, split decision, very close. Green outstruck him 65-30. Lance Gibson was able to land a couple of takedowns. I thought kind of that Lance Gibson won the fight, but I'm saying that in hindsight. I'm also saying that as someone who was a backer of Lance Gibson as the underdog there. But, Bobby Green, every time you think he's done on a losing streak, getting finished brutally like he did against Jalen Turner, brutally.
But I'm not impressed by your performance, and I look forward to.
He comes back. Now, Daniel Zellhuber. He was not born in 1986. He was born almost 13 years later in 1999. So he is, let's see, 26 years old, 15-3 as a professional. 7 wins by knockout, 3 by submission, 5 by decision. He has only ever lost by decision. So Zellhuber will have a 6-inch reach advantage. I think he's at least 2 inches taller. And this is a guy that had some smoke coming off, won on the Contender Series over Lucas Almeida, landed triple-digit strikes, lost his UFC debut to Trey Ogden by unanimous decision, 29-28 on only 1 scorecard, 30-27 on the other 2. Then beats Lando Veneta, Christos Giagos, and Francisco Prado. He's only had one inside the distance victory in the UFC up to this point. That was the submission over Christos Giagos, September of 2023. Beat Francisco Prado by decision, February of 2024, landing triple-digit strikes yet again, 120 to 90. Scorecards 30 to 26, 29 28, 29 28. Loses by split decision to Esteban Rivovic. He landed a knockdown that fight. They each landed over 100 strikes. That was at UFC 306. And he's coming off of an upset loss against Michael Johnson at UFC 318. UFC 318, which was held in New Orleans. Got outstruck by Michael Johnson 80 to 52. Got knocked down. Lost that fight 29-28 on all three judges' scorecards. And Michael Johnson, up to that point, like he had been winning, but against the kind of competition that you feed to Michael Johnson. Because people like to watch him and they don't want to see him get brutally finished anymore. He's not fighting contenders anymore. So what does Daniel Zellhuber have going for him? He's going to be in Mexico. He is still quite young. He's going to be considerably bigger, but I can't ignore this spot when Daniel Zellhuber hasn't won in over 2 years, only one finish in the UFC. The wins that he has in the UFC, the names at the very least aren't that impressive, and he hasn't been up to the challenge the last 2 fights, standing up. That can be a real problem against Bobby Green. So what do I think is the most likely method of victory? It's been a while since Bobby has lost a decision. You have to go back to August of 2021 when he fought Rafael Fiziev. I think if Daniel Zellhuber gets the win as the favorite here, I think he comes inside the distance and probably by knockout, but let's see if we even have to go there. So Zellhuber minus 500. Zellhuber inside the distance is minus 145. That's not horrible. By knockout is plus 160. Not horrible either. I think if this goes 3 rounds, I think it is an advantage for Bobby, really. If the much younger, larger guy can't get the finish up to that point over a dude who's 40 and has fought a billion times, so I would go Zellhuber inside the distance or by knockout, but Bobby Green plus 375, another of the bigger underdogs to, that I think you have to consider because of the recent circumstances for both of these fighters. I think Bobby Green relishes the opportunity to beat Daniel Zellhuber in Mexico. I bet he jumped at it. Next up, we are to the co-main event of the evening. And we have a bantamweight matchup between Marlon Chito Vera and David Martinez. Now, David Martinez has had a fast ascent. He is now number 10 in the UFC bantamweight rankings, ahead of Vinicius Oliveira, Rob Font, Kyler Phillips, and Montel Jackson. Right on this is a matchup between number 9 and 10. Chito's number 9. So, David Martinez, how are these all out of order? Is the minus 310 favorite, Chito the plus 260 underdog. Let's talk about the underdog, Chito, first. And you think, what? Chito, it's not like he's 40. He's fought so many tough people. He fought for the title not that long ago, so you may think. That was now almost 2 years ago at UFC 299. Should Chito be that much of an underdog here? I think that it starts to look more and more reasonable as you look at, his resume. So starting just he gets the upset win over Sugar Sean August of 2020. Loses to Jose Aldo by decision. He also lost to Song Yadong in 2020. Then goes on a 4-fight winning streak against Davy Grant, by decision. Knocks out Frankie Edgar. Beats Rob Font by decision in a close fight. and then knocks out Dominic Cruz in a fight that was going pretty well for Dominic Cruz up to that point. Certainly wouldn't say he was winning, but Cheeto knocked him out in the 4th round of a main event. But one that was a few years ago. Dominic Cruz and Frankie Edgar certainly were not in their primes, and now he's lost 4 of his last 5 fights. Loses to Corey Sandhagen in a fight that was a split decision. A terrible split decision. Then he gets a unanimous decision win over Pedro Munoz, who up to that point had lost 1, 2, 3, 4. So counting the Cheeto fight, he had lost 5 out of his last 7 fights. So Munoz was one old, even up to that point, and was not on a good run. But Cheeto gets the win over Pedro Munoz, unanimous decision, 29-28 on 1 scorecard. And that was enough to get him the second title fight against Sean O'Malley, or the title fight in the rematch with Sean O'Malley, because he was the guy that had beaten Sugar Sean up to that point. Gets outstruck 230-89, loses by unanimous decision, 50-44, 50-45, 50-45. Does have the huge knee at the end of round 5. That's too late to get that, but you know that he's capable of those bigger moments, sure. Loses to Davison Figueiredo by unanimous decision August of 2024 at bantamweight. 30-27, 29-28 on 2 of them. And then is coming off a split decision loss to Ayman Zahabi. Got outstruck 81-56, taken down or knocked down. Cheeto got the knockdown. 29-28 on all 3 judges' scorecards. There was 3 seconds of control time in total. So it's been, and Zahabi out of all those guys is on a really good run. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 wins in a row where he's beaten Javid Basharat, Pedro Munoz, Jose Aldo, and Marlon Chito Vera. Zahabi also pushing 40 years old. And these have been all, decision losses. The last time that he was finished in the UFC was never. He has never lost inside the distance in the UFC. And that is counting fights with John Lineker, Douglas Silva de Andrade, Song Yadong, Jose Aldo, Corey Sandhagen, Sugar Sean, Davison Figueiredo, and Ayman Zahabi. Never been finished. David Martinez, born in 1998, 5'5" with a 67-inch reach. He'll be at a 3-inch reach disadvantage, and he's 3 inches shorter than Cheeto. Beat Xavier Franklin on the Contender Series, outstruck him 79-46. Knocked out Simon Oliveira March of 2025, then is coming off a unanimous decision victory over Rob Font, outstriking him 62-49, winning 29-28 on all 3 judges' scorecards. Before he came to the UFC, Martinez, who is a 13-1 pro, 10 of his career wins by knockout, 3 by decision. He has only ever lost by decision. That was back in 2021 to Gianni Vasquez by split decision in Combate Global. But his pro career has been spent in Combate Global for the most part until he was on the Contender Series. He was the bantamweight champion there for Combate Global, defended it once. So, I mean, the momentum here certainly is there. I didn't think David Martinez was ready for Rob Font. I loved Rob Font as an underdog pick, and was 1 round away, a 1-round swing away from being able to win that. But the bookmakers here seem to think that it'll be very difficult for David Martinez to get a finish. For a guy, we've seen all kinds of odds tonight. For a minus 310 favorite, by decision is minus 215. Minus 215. Martinez by knockout, though, that's plus 575. If you're going to method of victory, go Martinez by knockout plus 575, the way that he's won the 10 of his 13 professional wins. I know Cheeto has never been knocked out in the UFC, but he's also never had this many fights in the UFC. Doesn't always seem to work out like, oh, he didn't get finished by that guy, that guy, that guy, that guy. Then a prospect comes along who's gaining more and more momentum, and you think, well, like, he didn't finish Rob Font. That was a close fight. Now, I could see David Martinez absolutely winning this fight by knockout. If Cheeto's going to take more chances, I think that'll leave more openings. So Martinez by knockout plus 575, much better value to me than Martinez by decision minus 215. If you were going to go Martinez to win over the course of 3 rounds, go Martinez to win by split decision plus 700. Cheeto can lose by split decision even if he had no business getting the scorecards from a single judge. So Martinez by knockout plus 525 or by split decision plus 700 is where I would go in his direction. Hit him. And really, like for Cheeto, plus 260, keep an eye on it. And like maybe even like Cheeto by decision plus 450 is the real way to go. It is hard to imagine him finishing Martinez. Not to say that it couldn't happen. I think both these guys are going to be fired up for this stage of UFC Mexico. But like Cheeto, another underdog here as we work our way up the main card that I think you have to consider if you're looking for underdogs. The competition he has faced is way better. He was able to finish a Rob Font that was more in his prime, close to 4 years ago. Only lost as a hobby, who's on a great winning streak by split decision. Competitive fights with Figueiredo. Could have finished Sean O'Malley if there was 30 more seconds, past the 5th round at UFC 299. So besides those two, longer shots for Martinez, Cheeto plus 260, Cheeto to win by decision plus 450. I don't hate those at all. And now, finally, 12 fights later, we are to the main event of UFC Mexico.
Oh God, take care of your underwears. I'm gonna you, man.
We have a flyweight main event between Brandon Moreno, the minus 210 favorite, and Loner Kavanaugh, the plus 180 underdog. Let's consult the UFC rankings real quick. So at flyweight, we got Joshua Van as champion. Pandoja, who knows how long he's going to be out. But then you got Kate, Tatsuro Taira, Brandon Royval, Kyoji Horiguchi. Brandon Moreno now finds his way down to 6th. Right above Amir Albazi, Asom Abayev, Tim Elliott, Alex Perez, Steve Erceg, Tajiro Ulanbekov, Charles Johnson, Bruno Silva, and Joseph Morales. Interested to see what Joseph Morales can end up doing. And Loner Kavanaugh came into the UFC as a touted prospect. So let's talk about the underdog Loner Kavanaugh first. 9-1 as a professional, 26 years old. Plenty of time for this guy, even if he doesn't get it done on Saturday. 4 wins by knockout, 1 by submission, 4 wins by decision. He has only ever lost by knockout, and that was to Charles Johnson in his last fight, August of 2025, where he was the minus 255 favorite. And yeah, Kavanaugh was actually supposed to fight Bruno Silva March 14th, but then got rebooked for this main event. Who's Brandon Moreno supposed to fight in this main event? Was it really supposed to be Asu Amabayev? Yeah, supposed to be Asu Amabayev. So Loner Kavanaugh as a professional, really his amateur career isn't that, he was a rise of champions champion. But as a pro, works his way through Cage Warriors, only has 4 fights in Cage Warriors. 2 of those went the distance, but they were against opponents with decent records. Like the last 2 that he fought had a combined record of 10-0. Finished one of those by 3rd round knockout, the other by decision. On the Contender Series, fights Antoine Ho. And that was a fight, that was a matchup that a lot of people were kind of upset about because it was an awesome fight to make for the Contender Series, but no one wanted to see either of those 2 prospects lose. And Kavanaugh's the one who ends up getting the first round knockout over Antoine Hose, now 7-2, 25 years old. He is coming off another unanimous decision, another loss on the Contender Series, this time by unanimous decision to Eduardo Henrique, September of last year. 25, still could definitely have a bright future. And when you're looking at Leonard Kavanaugh's wins in the UFC, it's been a struggle, against Jose Ochoa, who he was a minus 370 favorite against. He ends up outstriking him 51-50. Ochoa was the only one with any amount of control time, 36 seconds, 29-28 on 2 of the 3 judges' scorecards. Very thin margins, and as I recall, a disappointing performance for such a guy that was so heavily favored. Next time out, March of 2025, gets a decision win over Felipe dos Santos. This time he was a minus 275 favorite. Outstrikes dos Santos 58-51, 4 takedowns to 0, 6.5 minutes of control time. This time it's 29-28 on all 3 judges' scorecards. So it was a struggle up to the Charles Johnson fight for Leonard Kavanagh in the first place. And if you're a prospect who doesn't have, isn't minding your P's and Q's, you're not dotting your I's and crossing your T's, you don't want to mix paths with Charles Johnson. He is the prospect checker, and that is what happened. So for that one.
But I'm not impressed by your performance, and I look forward to.
But that happens. Now, Brandon Moreno will have a 3-inch reach advantage. He's an inch taller, and he's fighting in Mexico. It would be easy to discount Brandon Moreno. It's happened to him a ton of times before. Remember, this guy was originally cut from the UFC. And, it's only been the world's best title, champions, title contenders. That is who has been able to beat Brandon Moreno up to this point. Sergio Pettis, Alexander Pantoja. He had the draw with Figueiredo, then he beat Figueiredo, then he lost to Figueiredo, then he beat KKF, then he beat Figueiredo, then a loss to Pantoja, his kryptonite again. Loses to Brandon Royval, who he had previously beaten November of 2020. So, 1-1 with Royval, 2-0 over Kai Kara France. Whatever the record ended up being against Figueiredo. 1-1 against Divas and Figueiredo. 0-2 against Pantoja. His last 3 fights. November of 2024, wins by unanimous decision over Amir Albazi. That was 50-45 on 2 of the 3 judges' scorecards, 49-46 on Saul Diamato's. Then beat Steve Erceg by unanimous decision. He got outstruck 116-89. He got a takedown. Ultimately wins that 49-46 on all 3 judges' scorecards. Now he's coming off of getting knocked out by Tatsuro Taira, round 2, UFC 323. So the last pay-per-view event, pretty much ever in 2025. A fight that wasn't going his way up to that point, but also some people thought that fight was stopped maybe a little early. It's not one that bothered me too much. Not one that bothered me too much, but Tatsuro Taira might win the UFC Flyweight Championship. When his only loss previously and as a pro is to Brandon Royval in what was a split decision. Again, it could be that only people that have been champion or contended for championship are able to beat Brandon Moreno. And Leonard Kavanagh taking this main event in Mexico, what will now be, 4 fights into his real UFC career. Super young, struggled his way to beating Jose Ochoa and Felipe dos Santos. Not gone 5 rounds in the UFC. I don't know if Leonard Kavanagh has gone 5 rounds as a professional. No, he's gone the only championship fight he ever won was as an amateur in his last amateur fight. Never gone the distance. This is look, we've seen a lot of things happen. prospects, especially ones as young as Kavanaugh, who are coming off of a a learning experience of a loss. Certainly, Loner Kavanaugh could catch Brandon Moreno or get in a good position, like maybe on the ground, and start firing away with the ground and pound. I don't think Loner Kavanaugh is Tatsuro Taira. I don't think Loner Kavanaugh right now is Pantoja, Royval, Sergio Pettis. In Mexico, coming off of a loss, this is a crazy spot to be in for Loner Kavanaugh. And I think it would be getting cute to try to find ways that that's somehow an advantage for him, especially for Brandon Moreno, who's now fallen to sixth. Isn't, he's had plenty of these losing streaks where he's lost, he's gone 500 in a stretch or he's lost a few in a row. And every time we think he's done, he comes back better than ever, or comes back and it's like, oh, is he going to fight for the title next? If Joshua Van retains the title, Brandon Moreno gets a win or two, some things shake out. Obviously, Cape and Horiguchi are in front of that line, but you never know with the UFC title picture. We never would have guessed that Steve Erceg would have gotten a title shot at ranked what, number 10, 12, 13 in the flyweight rankings? Brandon Moreno, minus 210 is honestly surprising. It's surprising to see him only favored minus 210. I think that might be an overreaction to the Tatsuro Taira loss. Moreno by decision plus 175, I think is where people will want to go. That's according to the odds makers, that's the most likely method of victory. I will instead go Brandon Moreno. 16 of his career 23 wins are inside the distance, and 11 are by submission. Leonard Kavanaugh's only lost once. It was by knockout, but he's only lost once out of 10 fights. It's not an awesome sample size. Give me Brandon Moreno inside the distance. That's plus 165. Hit it. If you're going Kavanaugh, I think you got to go like Kavanaugh by knockout. Plus 500. Kavanaugh by decision is plus 350. It's the most likely method of victory for him. And he has never gone the distance as a professional. And this is against a guy who has fought and gone the distance in title fights, in high stakes main events over and over and over again against the best in the world at 125 pounds. Leonard Kavanaugh, I have to say.
Fuck off. Take care of your underwears. I'm gonna you, man.
So, folks, that is all 13 fights for UFC Fight Night in Mexico City. And now, with all that said and done, let's put together a couple of DraftKings lineups. I feel like this is going to be really difficult this week. Let me go ahead and share my screen. All right. Exit out of these. 10-cent contest, UFC Dime Time. All right. So first off, I want Brandon Moreno, and he's an absolute bargain at 8,700. He might make his way into my value picks article this week. So let's pick some underdogs here. Let's give us a chance here to get a lot of to get as many expensive people as possible. Let's go Bobby Green, 6,800. Let's go Eileen Perez, 8,500. You want to know how weird of a slate this is? There is a $800 gap in the middle between Macy and Eileen Perez. The closest handicapped fight. That is unusual. I should probably go with one more, maybe underdog. But let's not for now. Like, I don't want to pick Chiros. I might have to. I'll go like, oh, Ernesta's 9,100. Are you out of your mind? All right, I got to pick another underdog here. Let's go Borjas, 7,000. Now I can afford pretty much anybody. Let's go Quinones, 9,700. And let's go Luna, 9,300. Moreno at 8,700. Bobby Green, 6,800. Eileen Perez, 8,500. Kevin Borjas, 7,000. Christian Quinones, 9,700. Santiago Luna, 9,300. $0 remaining. Enter 10 cents. And let's do one more. And I'm actually gonna normally I do one for each fighter in the main event. I'm not gonna do that. I don't like the price of Loner Kavanaugh, so I'm gonna do another lineup with Brandon Moreno. As soon as his lobby loads. I guess sharing your screen is like kicking your computer in the balls as it is trying to operate. Okay, create new lineup. Jesus Christ.
I want to tell me what you see. Let's go ahead and see by the fight what you saw in the ring.
Okay, let's go Brandon Moreno, 8,700, starting it off. I'm still going to go Bobby Green, 6,800. This time, I'm going to go Macy, 7,700, and save the 800 difference between her and Eileen. I don't really have to go with another underdog now. I can go Javier Reyes, 8,600. I can 9,100 left per fighter. I'm going to go Quinones at 9,700. And that is unfortunate. So let's maybe not go Reyes or Quinones. Let's go. Let's go. Luna. Reyes. Martinez. So Moreno, 8,700. Bobby Green, 6,800. Macy, 7,700. Luna, 9,300. Javier Reyes, 8,600. And David Martinez, 8,900. Enter. All right, folks. That is it for episode 202 of the Tap That MMA podcast. Again, follow me on Twitter at RotoBrady. Follow me on Instagram at RotoBrady MMA. Follow the podcast at Tap That MMA Podcast on YouTube and Spotify. Now also available on Apple Podcasts and Amazon Music. Look out for my MMA DFS Values Picks article through RotoBowler Fridays. Look out for my spring football gambling content as the UFL season kicks off March 27th. Come out to the RotoBaller MMA Discord on Saturday before the card that starts at 5 p.m. Let's talk about what you're doing DFS-wise and betting-wise for UFC Fight Night Mexico City. Check out my recent interlude episodes with Mackenzie Stiller. The hair in my mouth. Emily Crown. Kobe, the Sandman Sanders, and the interlude episodes that I have coming up. Got plenty on the calendar. Thank you all so much for listening. Have yourselves a great week and peace.
Oh, dog. Take care of your underwears.
I want to tell me what you see. Let's go ahead and see by the fight what you saw in the ring.